Brian Windhorst here on the Rich Eisen Show. Well, how are you, Brian?
Hi, Rich.
Let's start with this. Are you surprised by the Nets telling Kyrie we won't even play you on the road? You surprised about that one?
No, they pretty much moved in that direction last week. So to give you a brief timeline, the rule was passed, the law was passed by the mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio. They knew there was a problem. And by the way, from what I understand, there was a handful of players on the Knicks and Nets who were unvaccinated when this law came down in August. And everybody knew this was a problem. They worked on it for weeks. Every other player for the Knicks or Nets got vaccinated by the opening of training camp except for Kyrie. Kyrie said, and everybody said, it's not going to be a problem. Don't worry about it. Actually, Kyrie said, privacy. They go out to San Diego, so Kyrie's able to do training camp. They have a meeting at Joe Tsai, their billionaire owner's home in La Jolla. Joe Tsai is very publicly pro-vaccine. He had Kyrie at his house. I'm sure the message was sent. Kyrie came back to New York and did not get vaccinated. And so then they first said, Kyrie, we're not going to move our practices. You can't practice with us. Kyrie still did not get vaccinated. Then they said, Kyrie, we don't think that we're going to necessarily be able to play you in away games, even though that's allowed unless you get vaccinated. Kyrie still didn't get vaccinated. And after 3 bites at the apple, Kyrie Irving struck out, and they said, we're moving on without you. Now, he obviously could end this today, tomorrow, whenever. He only needs to get one shot to satisfy the rule. But it is an untenable situation to play in the NBA where you can't have a guy play with you on a regular basis, especially when you have long homestands. The second week of the season, the Nets start a 6-game homestand. How are you not going to play with somebody for 6 games and then bring him back for the 7th? And so they just pulled the plug on it.
So do we know, and I'm going to ask you a question about you knowing what's in Kyrie's mind, do we know if it is something that he has legitimately researched and feels that the vaccine is dangerous for him, or there is some sort of belief system that it's against that belief system, or is it now just, I'm not going to let anybody tell me what to do. I've got enough money, or I've got enough pride. I'm a prideful man. Nobody's telling me what to do in this world. What is it? Do we know?
I'm sure that some of it, I won't speak for Kyrie, but I will say this. There's a point in Kyrie's career where he broke his kneecap, and he had surgery where they put some hardware into his knee, some screws, I believe. And those screws later became infected, and he had to have surgery to take them out, and he got this infection. I don't remember the exact type of infection. I don't want to misspeak, but he ended up having to get treated for this very serious infection for a long time. And so after somebody would go through something like that, I would understand that you would raise your level of concern and awareness of what goes into your body. So I definitely agree that Kyrie probably has a different worldview than the average person on the street. Having said that, he understands that if he doesn't get vaccinated, he can't play. It was made crystal clear to him. Hundreds of other NBA players were presented with the same situation. All the other players in New York were presented with the same situation. They said, I have to do this to play for my team. If you look at this Nets roster, Rich, it's a whole bunch of veteran guys who came there to win a championship. Obviously, Durant and Harden, but a bunch of guys who gave up money elsewhere to come play there. Guys in their 30s, this is their last chance. Paul Millsap, LaMarcus Aldridge, Blake Griffin, James Johnson. I could go on. And they're there, and they're like, we're going to try to do this mission. And so they all got vaccinated. Some of them probably didn't want to, but they got vaccinated. And so Kyrie on this front has little credibility in that locker room. And while Sean Marks gave a press conference today, and he stopped short of saying that Kevin Durant approved this or signed off on it, he basically said, you can ask Kevin his thoughts on it and myself. I have little doubt that they didn't have Kevin Durant's thumbs up ratifying this, even if they're not going to frame it that way, because Durant knows he had to make this decision as well.
So where do things stand? I mean, we wait for a Kyrie statement, or is there a point where he will be made available, or the Nets just cut ties with him and thus can't make him available? Like, literally, what is the next step on this sort of thing? Play basketball and then revisit it, or he's going to CVS right now? I mean, like, what? You know what I mean? Like, what happens here?
He has two choices, really. He can't. Well, I guess he's got three choices, but I mean, two viable choices. The first choice is to wait for the situation in the pandemic to improve, and perhaps this law in New York is, nullified, released. Who knows? There is a mayoral election coming up, I believe, in November. There will be a new mayor. The Delta variant numbers are going down, knock on wood, but who knows if anything's going to change. But, I mean, in theory, he can wait it out. Or two, he could, I don't want to say eat crow because that sounds like he's some sort of, bad thing, but he'd have to get the shot. I guess he could also, three, just retire, but I don't think that's viable. But I will say this. Mm-hmm. When he says no to this, he's not just saying no to playing on this championship team. He's not just saying no to half of his salary because he will not get paid half of his salary. He'll still get paid for the away games, even though they're choosing to make him inactive. But the Nets were prepared to give him a $160 million contract extension this offseason. This is not, I'm telling you, based on sources. The general manager, Sean Marks, when they signed Durant to a contract extension, said in August, we hope to have Kyrie signed by the start of camp. Obviously, he's not getting that contract extension right now. I don't know if he'll ever get it. And even if he was traded to another team, based on his decision-making and his focus, he's making a decision that he probably is never going to get that, at least for the time being. So he's put a lot on the line, especially financially, and also competing for this championship to defend the way he feels.
ESPN's Brian Windhorst here on the Rich Eisen Show. And this was breaking news earlier Tuesday. Monday night, I'll share a text exchange, gents, that I had with Brian on the phone. When he was booked, I said, looking forward to solving the Ben Simmons problem with you on air. You responded, that will take 30 seconds. Okay, so I'll give you the 30 seconds. Take more if you'd like, Brian.
Have you ever played poker? Do you know the game of poker?
I do very well. Yeah.
Okay. Ben Simmons made a bluff, and the 76ers called it, mm-hmm. and then folded.
That's basically it, huh? He folded, and
now, the game's not over. The hand is over, though. The game's not over. The hand is over.
All right, so we've moved the button. Now, who's the dealer? Is that Daryl Morey's the dealer in this poker game now? Because does that mean that Simmons is back in the Sixers fold, and thus they can give off the impression to the league that they're happy sticking with him, and now that makes him more, I guess, dollar on the dollar rather than cents on the dollar for a trade? Like, literally, what happens now, do you think?
Well,
Brian?
Now let's see how the next hand plays. How is Ben going to play this next hand? Is he going to play it the Jimmy Butler way, where Jimmy Butler wanted to be traded, didn't get traded, so he came into training camp and was an a-hole, took the third team and embarrassed his other starters and basically served notice, and if you don't trade me, I'm going to continue to mentally dominate you? I don't see that in Ben's repertoire, but maybe he'll switch up his play. Will he report and play full-bore basketball and show his all-NBA form and, lift his trade value? Will he claim injury? Or maybe he has a real injury, but that is an option here. This actually turned into something you're familiar with, Rich. In fact, I called Mike Tannenbaum last week to get guidance on how football holdouts operate, because this turned into a football holdout. In the NFL, players' signing bonuses are held in escrow, which I guess is a relic of back in the days when the players weren't sure that the teams actually had the money. And if you wanted to put my money that I'm supposed to get in a year in escrow, if I want to make sure I'm going to get it. So as a result, when a player is holding out, which usually is a player who has a signing bonus, a high-level player, and he gets fined, they just pull the money right out of that escrow account, that the team can actually physically put it in its pocket. Well, Ben Simmons was planning on the Sixers following his contract, which is pay me a quarter of my salary on July 1st. They did, $8 million. Pay me the second quarter of my salary on October 1st, which would have been $8 million. And his first actual paycheck that he could have been fined in wouldn't have been until November 15th. So they could fine him $8 billion between now and November 15th. But as long as it was resolved on November 15th, he could negotiate his way out of it. That's the way the NFL used to do it. Sit out all of training camp, but you get your contract done. As part of your new deal, it gives you back the fine money. But the NFL caught on to this, and they changed the rule so that once you were fined, you could never get the money back. And that is essentially what the 76ers did without getting clearance to do it. Instead of giving Ben Simmons the money that he was supposed to get on October 1st, they put it in an escrow account. This is something that's never been done before in the NBA, and I don't know for sure, but I would bet that it was done as they looked at how the NFL handles holdout players. And so with every time that Ben Simmons didn't show for a practice or a game or whatever, they pulled money out of that escrow account. And so instead of him having half of his salary in his pocket and then we'll figure it out by November 15th, now all of a sudden he only had a quarter of his salary in his pocket, and every single day he was watching money come out of that escrow account, and he reported. And I'd say that the 76ers won that round. And so let's now see, will he do what NFL players do when he pushed back? As a result, NFL players like T.J. Watt, for example, they didn't hold out. They held in, report, and then basically don't play. Will, after seeing the Sixers act like an NFL team, will Ben Simmons act like an NFL player and hold in? That is the next round of this poker match we're going to watch.
Or he just gets traded. I mean, why hasn't this Code Red been ordered? Like, why is he still on this team? I mean, honestly, you got game one Friday, October 22nd in Philadelphia. That's their first home game. He'll be savaged once he steps on that court. We all know it. The whole world knows it, and whether kid deserves it or not, I mean, how is this tenable at all moving forward, Brian? Right?
Well, because the Sixers don't like what they are being offered right now. And again, let's go back to the poker analogy. The hands that Daryl Morey keeps getting dealt, he doesn't like, so he's throwing them away. And he's saying, I'm just going to wait. I'm going to wait for that team that was that general manager who knows he's got to make the playoffs or lose his job for his team to get off to a 500 start. You start the season 8-8 or something. I'm going to wait for that team that has a major injury and needs a major trade. Or I'm going to wait for another star player who I may want to get angry with his team and demand a trade. And so really Daryl Morey is just kicking the can down the road. He doesn't like what his trade options are now. It's not really his prerogative at this point to make sure Ben is happy with the fans. I think he's just waiting for the situation to improve so his trade options improve. And it's kind of an important maneuver because if you look at the Sixers and where they are as an organization, they're in Joel Embiid's prime. They built a decade to get this team. They were the number one seed in the Eastern Conference last year before, Embiid got hurt and Simmons, went down the side of his leg in the middle of the playoff series. This is not a time to take a step back. And so he doesn't feel he can make a trade that is a trade that what we call a four quarters trade. You take the dollar that is Ben Simmons and you trade him for 4 quarters because in the NBA, 4 quarters doesn't make a dollar. You wait where you can trade $1 for $1. Now, does that work? Maybe not, but he knows it's not going to work today. The situation could change by November 20th or December 15th.
Last one for you, Brian Windhorst. That October 22nd home opener for the Sixers is against the Brooklyn Nets. What about Daryl taking Sean Marks aside and saying, Philadelphia doesn't require vaccinated players to play indoors. And, we think Ben Simmons would look pretty good over there. Let's swap our problems for each other. What do you think of that one?
Well, 2 things I'm going to say about that. One, we don't know for sure that Ben Simmons is vaccinated. We shouldn't assume that.
Okay.
But we also, a big factor here is that Kyrie, would he report after a trade? Number one. Number two, he has 1 year left on his contract. He can opt out after next season.
Oh, boy.
Now, at this point, I think he would be crazy to opt out. But if you're Philadelphia, you're not going to make that type of trade with a guy who you may be renting for a year. So while I agree on paper, it makes all the sense in the world. The Nets badly need perimeter defense. It would be terrific to get Ben Simmons. He wouldn't need the ball. They can let James Harden handle it. He can play off of it. It would be perfect. Kyrie can come in. Kyrie actually has a good relationship with Joel Embiid. Way better than Embiid's relationship with Ben Simmons. And the way they can play off each other would be terrific. It makes all the sense in the world. But there's so much else at hand that would be difficult in actually negotiating the trade, the actual mechanics of the trade, that I think it's hard to necessarily see, at least right now.
And especially if Philadelphia Mayor Jim Kenney suddenly, day after the trade, says, guess what? We have a vaccination mandate to play inside in Philadelphia now. And then that would blow that up, too. I mean, this is crazy, Brian. I mean, what a crazy world we're living in right now. And the NBA is right around the corner. I appreciate your 2 cents, as always. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Have a good day.
You bet. Drive safely. That's Brian Windhorst. Always makes us smarter. Always makes us think. Right here on the Rich Eisen Show from the worldwide leader in sports. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.